Morning, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting for Tuesday, February 6th. All selectmen are here, save Mr. Shea. First, we have an update from the MAPC Executive Director, Mr. Mark Drayson. Mr. Drayson, please join us.
Do you want me to sit down?
Whatever you like, sir.
I don't think I'm using the...
No, whatever you're most comfortable with. Stand, you can sit there, whatever you like. Perfect.
I'm a little better standing, so...
Welcome, sir.
Good evening, folks. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Mr. Calendar. We appreciate your giving time to this brief presentation. My name is Mark Drayson. I'm the Executive Director of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which is the regional planning agency for Greater Boston and which serves the town of Southborough along with 100 other cities and towns in the Greater Boston region. From time to time, we like to come out to all of our communities to talk with boards of selectmen and planning boards, tell you a little bit about what MAPC does, hear back from you about ways in which we can better serve the town and advance your interests. We are an all-purpose regional planning agency. We have a staff of approximately 90 individuals, and they cover a wide range of areas of expertise. I'll rattle through a few of them: land use planning and zoning, housing and economic development, public safety, public health, clean energy, climate adaptation and mitigation, municipal efficiency and effectiveness, regional collaboration, stormwater. Basically, you name an issue that affects the built or the natural environment, and I probably have one or two people who work on that issue. And we do include some of the big cities like Boston and Cambridge and Somerville, and we work with them and assist them from time to time, but to be perfectly honest, they have big staffs of their own. And so to us, one of our primary reasons for existence is to provide help to some of the smaller communities who have excellent staff, but small staff. When you may run into an issue, a development issue, a transportation issue, an environmental issue, where you may need an extra pair of hands and an extra pair of eyes, we are available to provide you with that support and assistance. We provide a lot of technical assistance to individual cities and towns. Generally, that's through 2 RFPs, which we release. One is on the street now, or I should say not on the street, in the town manager's office. And one is released at the end of the spring. And basically, that enables communities to recommend to us through a very simple form, just a couple of pages, a project that we might be able to do to provide you with assistance. Prior to the meeting, I met with some town officials, including town administrator, and talked over a number of possibilities, but we are always available to provide assistance and support to you in any area within our topics of expertise. The Commonwealth generously contributes some of those funds. All of the communities pay a municipal assessment, and in addition to that, we are lucky to have federal transportation planning dollars and also considerable infusion of funds from Boston area foundations, which honestly are not always available out here in Metro West, but we can sort of serve as a conduit for some of those resources. In addition to the work that we do sort of at the central office in Boston, we know that we're a big region. It's 101 cities and towns, 3.2 million people, about 2/3 of the state's jobs, and it would be really difficult for all of those 101 communities to communicate with each other just by coming to meetings in Boston all the time. So we have 8 subregions, each of which has about a dozen communities. The inner core, which is sort of Boston and surrounding communities, that's a little bigger. That's about 22 communities. And then North Shore, North Suburban, the Minuteman area, which is out along Route 2, Metro West, which includes the Southborough communities, Southwest, and then what we call 3 rivers, and you get a prize if you can name the 3 rivers, and then the South Shore. And each one of those has its own bylaws. It has its own boards with representatives from each of the communities. Very often, they also put on those boards individuals who have regional interests in that subregion, maybe from an institution or a chamber or a major employer, but the majority are local representatives. And I assign a staff person, a sub-regional coordinator, to assist with the administration and work of that particular subregion. The subregions generally meet locally within the subregion once a month. Some meet in the morning, some meet in the evening. Some change it up every now and then. They also get guest speakers. They do planners' roundtables. They offer opportunities for selectmen and planning board members to commune with one another and talk about regional issues and share ideas. And it's a critical form of communication back to MAPC. We can let the subregions know what's going on Beacon Hill and in the governor's office and in the secretariats, and we get information back from the subregions about critical issues in each of those subregions, opinions on legislative or gubernatorial questions, ideas of how to interact on federal issues, and other things like that. So the subregions really are one of our primary ways of back and forth communication. We are always available to provide services and assistance to you. Historically, in my tenure at MAPC, which is now about 15 years, I have worked with a lot of great folks from the town of Southborough, Charlie Gaffney, Vera Colias when she was here, Sal Giordano, and several other people. Charlie was on our executive committee for many years. And we are available now as well. So I really feel like this is an important relationship. It's important to us. I feel we can provide you with some assistance, support, information, and I would be glad to answer any questions that you might have. I might note that I have with me here today Karen Edelman, who lives in the town of Natick and who is our sub-regional coordinator for the Metro West Regional Collaborative, as well as Mark Rassicott, who is our director of land use planning. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Questions from Mr. Drayson? Ms. Fanoff?
I have just one. You said you met earlier with some town officials?
Yes.
What was the discussion as far as what the town could benefit from?
Well, we discussed a lot of different things, but I think it's fair to say that we talked about three possible ideas. One was assisting the town sort of in helping to form a better system for dealing with economic development staffing. We have many of our communities want to hire economic development staff, and it can be challenging for an individual small community with a limited budget to be able to hire into that kind of a position. Some towns choose to do it jointly, others do it part-time, others use a combination of local services and services from MAPC. So one idea was to try and work with the town around that question of economic development, staffing, and planning capacity, which would work in concert, with Karina as the town planner. Another topic we talked about was, transportation planning. Right now, Karen and the Metro West Regional Collaborative are doing a sub-regional transportation visioning to try and help all of the communities in Metro West figure out what should be some of our jointly held transportation priorities: road, transit, bike and pedestrian, throughout the region, that maybe we should really focus on over the course of the next several years. I think, if I recall correctly, that Selectman Shea has participated in some of those conversations. So we can also bring MAPC staff out here to take a look at what you might consider to be some of your main transportation challenges just in Southborough, and see if we can begin to make some suggestions about possible ways of dealing with that. And then the third issue, very similar to what we do in Marlborough pretty frequently, is if in Framingham we've done it as well. From time to time, a community will have really critical development parcels that have some difficulties or some challenges. They might be boundary parcels. They might have one owner that's difficult to deal with, or 10 owners, which can also be difficult to deal with. And we will come out and do some work with you, taking a look at that parcel, seeing if we can suggest some ways that you can unlock some of the more potential there. We did that, for example, with Tech Park in Framingham recently, and that resulted in the adoption of some new zoning in that area.
A quick follow-up. Southborough's in Worcester County.
I'm sorry?
Southborough is in Worcester County.
That's correct, yes.
Is there a benefit for Southborough to be working closer with Worcester County than Metro West?
Well, Worcester County, most counties in Massachusetts either don't exist or are very limited in terms of their governance. So I don't honestly think, with the exception of a few really of the rural counties, like obviously Barnstable County and the Islands and Franklin County, where town government is fairly narrow, the counties are still very robust. That really isn't as true generally in eastern Massachusetts. So I feel that it is best to work with the established regional planning entities that are available to provide you with support. Now, all that having been said, the reality is that Southborough is close to the boundary of the MAPC region, and all of our regional planning agencies, which, by the way, meet at my office every month from throughout the state. We work very collaboratively with each other, and we do a lot of shared projects. We are always aware when the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission does some work here, and they are aware when we may bring some of our areas of expertise to bear across their boundary, and we do a lot of projects together. We're very collaborative, and it is totally reasonable for towns that are near the boundary to have a relationship with both regional planning agencies. That's totally fine as far as we're concerned.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Mr. Drayson, thank you. It was a wonderful update. Thank you to you and also your team members that are coming out tonight. And I'd like to work with you, myself, Mr. Purple, on some things that we can identify. I know we have two significant projects, about to kick off for the town, and maybe there's something that we could do with MAPC on, whether it's any type of collaboration that could help in the public safety facility, the reconstruction project, the economic development initiatives that we have going on in the downtown, to see if we could bring them in, and maybe there's something we could benefit from with that. I appreciate it.
Let us know how we can help. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next, we're going to have an update from the Council on Aging, Chairman Bill Harrington. Mr. Harrington, welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir.
And do you have a presentation tonight, sir?
Yes.
Is there? Yep. We
Yes, we do.
And I know we received all of your information in our packets. I trust the selectmen have all gone through it. Feel free to hit the highlights of what you'd like us to focus in on, and welcome.
Okay, we need to get this fired up.
Yep, hang on. That's coming.
Well, it's coming. I'm Bill Harrington, Chairman of the Council on Aging. With me is Pamela Francis. She's the Director of the Senior Center, and we have several supporters, members of the Council on Aging here to be with us tonight. I'm hoping that pretty soon we'll have a picture up there.
Is your presentation sponsored by Sony?
I guess it is.
Okay.
Here we go.
There we
There
go.
we-
Hey.
There we are. Okay. I'm here tonight just to tell you a little bit, past, present, and future, of what's going on behind the picket fence at 9 Carterville Road, Carterville Hall. 20 years ago, we were housed in the Fayville Hall. We had a little room in Fayville Hall. We had a part-time director with a budget of $7,000 a year. That was 20 years ago. 15 years ago, we moved to 153 Carterville office building, where we jumped up to, we had an area of 1,500 square feet.
Bill's gonna show me where the arrows are. I
Oh.
forgot to do that.
He said it would go.
There we go.
That's Fayville Hall. That's our little space, little office area, and little tiny place, cramped area for events. Then we moved to the office building on Carterville Hall. You can see the reception area, and then you can see the other end where we had a function, and they were packed in there for a function, obviously,
The off-
St.
the-
Patrick's Day.
The people in the office building loved the piano.
Then, 10 years ago, we really jumped ahead and we moved to the present location of Carterville Hall. This is a picture showing the function hall before the renovations. We had the open ceiling, we had the beams, we had the heat in the summer and the cool in the winter. Then, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, we totally redid the function area. We added a sound system, we dropped the ceiling, we added heating and ventilating, and the biggest thing we did was the movable walls, which allowed us to have 3 different activities going on simultaneously in the function hall. This was a great boon to the senior center. We could really do some great activities. And then, a couple of years ago, we renovated the kitchen, which was a wonderful thing. We don't have the facilities to actually put on meals. Most of our meals, luncheons, and so forth are done by caterers, and this was a great caterer's kitchen that allowed us to do what we have to do. With that history, I'm going to turn this over to Pam, who's going to talk a little bit about the statistics of the senior center and about some of the programs and activities.
Okay, things have changed a lot over the years. Basically, the senior center has been around for 20 years. It started in that one room, and it's grown to where we are today. And that's kind of the evolution of most senior centers. They pretty much existed in even smaller forms than that prior to 20 years. One of the senior centers in the area, I remember the senior center phone would ring at her house. So that's kind of where we came from. For us, we came from that one room over at Corderville Hall. We serve a wide variety of people. Everybody from people in their 50s. The oldest person I think we've had at senior center is 102. So it's a real big range of people to program for. We try to do something for everybody. We spend a lot of time talking to people, asking the people that live at Southborough, what do you want? What do you want from your senior center? Fortunately, we know the people really well. Myself and the staff has been in it for a long time, so we have good relationships with a lot of the people, and we're spending a lot of time getting to know the new people that are coming in, and there are plenty of them. And like I said, there's a wide range. People that haven't retired are asking, can we come? I'm not 60 yet. And then people that are older, there's a lot of people that are in need of services, and there's just a lot more people. And people have varying financial situations. There are people that can afford to kind of do whatever they want, but we offer different things at the senior center to bring them in for those those individual programs that might catch their eye, and then they see what a great place it is and how friendly people are and how welcoming it is. And next thing you know, there's a guy playing, he starts to play pool, he starts to get to know people, and comes back, and then they bring their spouses in, and it's really nice. We're really fortunate to be able to have that firsthand contact with people, and have such, great seniors. The other thing that we're really dealing with a lot more recently is dementia, Alzheimer's, caregivers in general, and their families. What you don't see is what our outreach coordinator does and what our nurse does, and what the rest of the staff does too. Is we make contact with people, we help guide them through a real variety of situations, a lot of difficult situations, and it's not something we talk about because we can't and we wouldn't, but we spend an awful lot of time doing that, and I'd say more time doing that now than we ever have. Next slide. Here's the statistics. Since we started tracking them with a computer system. When I first started, we had the hash mark system, and now we have a data collection system that gives us a rough idea of how many seniors we serve. We're up to about 900 seniors. Those people could come in once a year. They could come in every day. So if you look at our duplicated numbers, they're huge because people come in on a regular basis. So we've had steady growth, and fortunately, the last few years especially, we've had some real steady support from the Board of Selectmen and the Advisory Board to help us keep up with that growth. So we're really appreciative of that. These are some of the statistics. As you can see, there's some real growth coming down the road. We've had some steady growth, and it's going to keep on coming. And along with that comes people looking for activities, programs. Our job basically is to keep people healthy and happy, living in the community, and we're there to support them. But along with that comes medical problems, financial problems, assistance being needed with insurance. Navigating these systems is a real challenge, and that we have a Shine counselor. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a volunteer, believe it or not, that puts in hours and hours and hours on everything you wanted to know about health insurance. HMOs, indemnity plans, Medicare. We're super lucky to have her along with the staff. So there's a lot of support there, but based on the volume of people, we need to do even more of that. This slide gives you an idea of, it's been confusing as far as what our real budget is and what it takes to operate the senior center. This gives you kind of a bigger picture. We have the town budget that is primarily salaries. some operating, and a small portion for program support, which we're really fortunate to have. The Friends of the Council on Aging has been very supportive. They do a couple of fundraisers during the year, and they basically expend, their goal is to spend what they take in each year. They're not sitting on money, they're not stockpiling money, and that's a ballpark number of what they do to help to support the program budget. We have had a number of grants over the years. The formula grant is a state grant, and it has been fairly steady, but it is out of our control. It's controlled by the state. So fortunately, it's been not cut by much. This year we took a 3% cut, but over the years it's been threatened. It's been threatened halfway through the year after we've spent half the money. So it's one of those things that's great to have, but we don't want to rely too heavily on it because it is out of the town's control. The newest grant that we've received is from, and we have over the past few years, is from the Southborough Community Fund. And the Southborough Community Fund this is our third grant year with them. They funded our Friendly Visitor Program staff, a Knox Box program, which is those boxes, key boxes with the fire department to access homes if necessary, an Art for Healing program, nutrition program, demonstrations, and most recently, the Caregiver Meals Program, which provides a meal every other week to people that are in that stressful caregiver, full-time caregiver type position. It's a great meal. The grant pays for it. It's delivered by super volunteers. The volunteers connect with the people. It's not really about the food. It's not a nutrition-based program. What it's about is connecting with these people that are in these really stressful situations. So not only does the volunteer connect with the people, our outreach coordinator, Cindy, calls every other week and checks on these people and just basically as a reminder call. But it's really a great tool to connect, to see if anybody needs anything, to offer support to both the caregiver and the individual. The other thing that they fund is an emergency fund, and that is a collaborative with the food pantry and Youth and Family Services and the Senior Center. And we work together to distribute those funds for emergency situations, short-term situations. We offer a huge variety of programs. Like I said, we're trying to program for a real range of people. As far as fitness is concerned, we have 4 different levels of Tai Chi. That seems to be what people really want, and so that's what we're trying to offer. We offer a fitness program, a walking group. Water aerobics is new. That's through the formula grant. Bill's trying to rush me through. He's got my 8-minute clock on me. Dull Men's Group is something that Bill came up with. It turned out to be something I never expected. We probably averaged 25 guys on Fridays. It's just turned out to be a wonderful, wonderful thing for a lot of people. Our Trailblazers group is super active. That is another program that we've been able to develop this volunteer model where volunteers, we only have so many staffing hours, so volunteers are in a position now to run some of these programs, and we can do more with the volunteers. That is our greenery. No, that might be bingo. We do a ton in the kitchen. We have a ball with that. Our card groups are very active. Holiday parties have always been very successful. Our greenery programs, that program used to have a dozen people. Now we can't even fit them in the room. 30 people, we had to, cap it. So our programs are growing, they're expanding. And like I said, we're trying to do what the people want. And we're trying to, we ask them, what do you want us to do? And it might take us a little while, but we get there. We do a lot of intergenerational program. We work with the fire, police, the other departments in town, Charter Your School Band. I think hits the highlights of those things. Some of the things that you don't know about or you may not know about is we have a website. John Del Rios is incredible on that. He keeps that up to date along with our program coordinator, Peg. We have handyman program where volunteers assist with small home repairs, caregiver meal program, the Shine Counselor. We have the tax work-off program, which has 30 participants. The Forget-Me-Not flower program is kind of an important program that Leslie developed for people that have lived in town forever and have now moved out of town for whatever reasons into nursing homes or assisted living facilities, and it's funded through the Friends. And it's just, we work with the local florist to just bring them something every 6 months or so, to let them know that we didn't forget them, because they were a big part of what we do at the senior center. And just because they had to move out of town, we don't want them to think we forgot about them.
Okay, I'm going to pick up here. I'm going to just pat ourselves on the back a little bit before we leave. Each year, the Massachusetts Council on Aging holds a conference for staff of all the senior centers in the state. This past fall, we attended and we presented one of the workshops. Actually, it was one of the more successful workshops. They have 50 workshops during a 3-day period at the conference. We did a workshop discussing the model that we've come up with for volunteers supporting the staff and allowing the staff to have some additional programs that are actually, the ownership of those programs are taken over by volunteers. One of them is the Trailblazers, which Mary Ann Anderson has taken ownership of. One of the other ones is the Men's Club, which is my baby. You all have been there. You all know what we do there, which is kind of an interesting coffee clash where men just solve all the problems of the world in 1 hour on Friday morning. But we gave a workshop that discussed this model and the fact that this is an opportunity to get some more bang for your buck by utilizing volunteers to take ownership of some of these programs. And now at a national level, we just were informed that we were runner-ups in a leadership training program where we presented the model for the Trailblazers and utilizing volunteers to run these.
There was only one runner-up. Only one runner-up.
So we were the second runner-up.
We're number 2.
So we've expanded our notoriety a little bit through the state and now national. One of the other things I'd like to mention is that we are currently trying to, again, do another renovation for the senior center. We did the one 8 years ago. We have a real serious problem with toilets at the senior center. At an evening event or a meeting, there is only one toilet in that senior center that's available, which is certainly public buildings should have much more than that. So we hope to add some toilets area. We hope to expand out the front of the building to increase the dining area. We're very cramped in the kitchen when we run a luncheon. There's only 2 little tables tucked in corners where people can eat. There's only 1 little table tucked in a corner where people can come in and read a newspaper or converse or watch the TV. So we hope to expand out the front of the building, and we hope to add some more activity space as well. We are now on the queue in the capital plans for the next coming years. We hope to get started this year by doing some engineering on the current building, what it exists of and what we are going to be dealing with. The next year, we hope to have a design engineering contract to do the detail work on our expansion, come up with a price in the following year, put it on the town warrant, and get some money to do some expansion. We hope this can go ahead. One other thing we're concerned about is the salaries of our senior center director and program director. We know that the personnel department is working on that, and we hope that you as the selectmen will just kind of keep the pressure on them, and maybe we can bring our staff up to what the peers in other comparable towns get for salaries. With that, I'd just like to say that we feel that the Council on Aging has presented very reasonable budgets over the years. Our requests have been what we feel are in line with what the town can afford and what we really need. And we hope going forward that in the future that we will continue to get the support of the senior center, to the selectmen and the advisory board for our realistic plans for the future. With that, I'd like to say thank you very much for allowing us to put on this presentation.
Thank you, Bill, and
Thank
thank you, Pam. That was excellent, and I just want to make a couple comments, and we'll open it up to other comments or questions. But one of the biggest things I think I've seen, and I tell you, the pictures you had, Bill, are wonderful. I mean, the Veterans Day event is a highlight for me every year. I love that luncheon. I love the event. I love the singing. I love the decorations. The kids that come over from Woodward and sing for all the veterans every year. That is a beautiful event. And I know there's many of those throughout the year. The senior center is a great place for so many in our town to come and participate in those things. And you know, I have been and continue and will be very supportive of the senior center. I think you've got a nice plan laid out of expansion of what things that you're going to need it. You know, we're going to serve more and more seniors in the very short, few years to come. And Pam, one of the things you said early on in your presentation was how people were welcoming and friendly, and you epitomize that. You're
Thanks.
always there with a smile, greeting me and anyone else who comes into that center. And Bill, you with the Dole Men's Club, that is a great event. You also, and everyone part of that club, have always been incredibly welcoming. So just a very positive place in our town, and in large measure to what both of you do. So thank you for everything you do for
Thank you.
that.
Thank you.
Other comments, Bonnie?
I was a member of the board at the time when we purchased the building in 2004, so we've had it for quite a while, and all of the transitions and all of that. I'm not in favor of delaying. I think it needs to be in the queue. It needs to be in the capital plan. It needs to be done sooner than later. I think the funding request for the $30,000 was reasonable. I'm not supportive of anything less than that. And what's going to happen, we're going to get to a point that the building is not going to be able to handle the occupancy. And then that becomes a fire issue. The building, if you looked at the building, it appears very large. The space that the seniors use is the exact same space they've been using since the day they moved in there. We put offices on the basement, which is really considered the first floor because depending on how you enter. The second floor is the seniors. We dropped the ceiling. The chapel at the time looks much larger as far as being used. It's not. They're sandwiched in between two floors. And to delay this, we're delaying opportunities for seniors, and I can only speak for myself because I am a senior, and for anyone else that wants to join, it's limited. And if you looked at one of the events, if you were in a wheelchair or needed assistance, you would not be able to make it around any of the rooms or any of the tables. I think we are doing a disservice to a population in this town that have been promised since 2004 to be patient. I'm not patient any longer. I think we keep saying, we're listening to you. Someday we'll put it in there. It hasn't happened. This debt has been paid off in 2013. I checked today. It was a 10-year bond. Am I correct, Brian?
Yeah, it was actually a little later than that.
Right, but it's paid off, and they're still waiting. And I see other articles, and I have grandchildren that use recreation, so I'm not trying to pit one organization against another, but when you start seeing $1 million expenses, I think we need to prioritize and start addressing a segment of this population that has been very patient, and it should start this year.
Well said, Bonnie. Sparkio.
Thank you, Bonnie. I could not agree more with that. I would also have liked to have seen this move forward with a lot of the requests that are on the capital plan. Bonnie was well-spoken on that, so I'll let that go and say I agree with her. I would just like to commend Pam. I have been fortunate enough to be able to go to the senior centers, interact with our seniors at the center, and I will tell you, it is an amazing place. And anybody at home that may be watching, and anybody here that has never been there, let me just tell you, this is a home away from home. This gives our seniors an opportunity, instead of being home by themselves, to be able to go out, spend an hour, interact with their peers, have someone to talk to. I know from my mother-in-law's standpoint that, you know, she didn't make it there as much as she would have liked to, but those times that she did, it was very important to her. And we have a segment of the population that basically gets no services, doesn't use a lot of the things that are available in town. But this is their home away from home. And I think that's what we as a population need to understand. The programs that they do there are absolutely amazing. The Trailblazers was one that was mentioned. They're getting the seniors out. They're going all over the state. They're going on walks. They've gone into Boston. They've done so many wonderful, wonderful things. And I think this is a true gem that we have here. And the biggest thing of our senior center is it's home. You go to some of the other senior centers in our area, and it's very impersonal. Not here. You walk in the door, and it's a family. There's this crazy little clock that I absolutely love that hangs in the kitchen. I know some people don't like it. But again, it's something you would see at home. And you know, these little meals that happen, and kudos to the Friends for being able to help support these things, the $3 lunches that our seniors have. For a lot of the seniors, this is their one day out a week. This is the one opportunity to see people. And I think we as a town, and I think most of the town supports the senior center, but I just don't think people realize some of the things that go on. The caregiver meals that Pam has mentioned, I've had the pleasure of being able to deliver these a time or two. And let me tell you, she's exactly right. It's not the meal, it's the conversation of somebody coming to your door, saying, hi, how you doing? Or even the Southborough gardeners do flowers. And I've had the pleasure of doing that as well. It's just these little touches that we can give to a population that doesn't have the capabilities that the rest of us have as far as being easy to get someplace or do something. So huge kudos to Pam for putting together an amazing program, an amazing place. Kudos to the Friends, to everybody that sits on the council, and to Bill, the Dull Men's Group, who I've had the absolute pleasure of going to and love going there. Again, it's a home away from home, and I think if our taxpayers think of that when they think of the space needs, I mean, many times I've gone into Pam's office to have a conversation and there's somebody playing cards because they don't have the room. Every other space is filled. There's people in the kitchen, there's people in the 3 other rooms. There's always things going on. So I think this does, as Bonnie said, need to be forefront that, you know, we need to take care of our seniors here in town. I mean, we take care of, that's what Southborough does. That's what makes Southborough so great is we take care of each other. And this is an opportunity for us to be able to take care of our seniors also that appreciate we're in need where they're at. So again, thank you.
We may need to expand for no other reason than to make room for the next troop care package drive.
There you go, as well, exactly.
Which is always an incredible event. Mr. Schifrin.
Yeah, thank you for everything that you're doing there. I've been down there several times, and it's a very busy place, fun and interesting things going on. It's clear that it's a needed service, and the need for the expansion and the renovation is just highlighted with the presentation and the comments tonight. So I think that's been heard. Certainly even listening to what you were talking about with the current plan you have, I thought it sounded very drawn out for the current needs that there are. So hopefully that can be addressed. One question I do have on another topic. Do you have current needs or availability for volunteers, youth and adults at the senior center?
We always can use more volunteers. We've been really fortunate that when we've lost volunteers they moved out of town or for whatever reason, we've been really lucky at being able to get more volunteers. Volunteer meals, drivers for Meals on Wheels or the Caregiver Meals Program, people that help us, you know, do the setups. I mean, Peg does an amazing job, but she's got a crew of volunteers that really step up. The meals, they cook meals on Fridays when we have a movie or bingo. You know, there's a bunch of ladies that just do an incredible job. So yeah, there's always a need for volunteers. We try to, if somebody comes to us and said, you know, I have some time, we try to find the right fit for that person. So it's really fun for them too. And, you know, they get something out of it. You know, it's good for everybody. And, you know, our board member, we have board meetings. We have people that come to the board meetings that aren't board members. It's quite a good-sized group of people. So if anybody wanted to come to those and contribute, along with a fantastic staff, we've got an amazing board, and just an incredible group of volunteers. We couldn't do it without all those people. So
if people are interested, either youth or adults, what would they do? Who would they contact?
Give us a call. They can call me or call Peg. Be happy to talk to them. First thing we do is ask them to come over, sit down, find out what they want to do, find out what they're interested in, and see where the best fit is.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Vanna?
Originally, the request was for $30,000. That was for study design work for the building addition. Can I ask who came up with that number?
That was the number that was presented to us by the facilities director, I believe, working with Mr. Harrington.
All right, I'm going to ask that this board consider putting that back into the budget, find out what it covers exactly, so that we're prepared to answer that, and also where this would fit into a debt schedule if the town decides to do that.
So, Mrs. Fan, if I could just make a suggestion. So and we're kind of jumping into the budget presentation. I think there was going to be an opportunity to address that, but I'll address it now. When it comes to our capital plan, we have a process. And, you know, we try to plan for these expenditures so that they all don't get bunched into one fiscal year. We try to even them out so that we don't, you know, like this year, we've got twice as much capital as we had last year because we've deferred things, we've pushed them down the road. We try not to do that. We also don't fund things, you know, within our capital plan, within our capital budget, that aren't in our plan. And this $30,000 that was brought forward, you know, was not in our plan. And so we've had discussions with the facilities director and talked about, you know, do we want to do this as a separate article, similar to how we're handling recreation, because recreation's request for their 5 projects was not done within the capital plan. You know, other things rec wants to do, we have talked about putting it into the plan. And do we do it as a separate article, or is it something that facilities can begin the process inside their maintenance article? And the discussion was to do it inside of the maintenance article. If you would prefer to put it as an outside article, then it can be handled that way too. Now, at the end of the day, you take a look at all of your articles, all of your financial articles, and you figure out what the impact is on your tax rate. So, you know, it's all one pot, but I think in order to maintain the integrity of the capital plan process, if you want to break it out, I would suggest you do it as a separate article.
I'm suggesting that it be in the capital plan, and then we sharpen our pencils and we find where to find that $30,000.
So it's not a problem. We're jumping, you know, ahead a little bit. We normally
have the Council on Aging
we
in
normally
front of us.
fund. I understand that. We normally have $100,000 in the maintenance fund
Right.
for facilities. We were cutting that to $75,000 this year. Okay, the request that was coming forward from the Council on Aging was going to be done inside the maintenance article, and we were going to move that back up to the normal $100,000, and it was going to be absorbed in there. If you want to do it as a separate article, or you want to put it inside the capital plan, which I don't recommend, but that's your choice, then the maintenance fund will be brought back to the $75,000 level.
All right, do it as a,
Okay.
then I would recommend that it be a separate
So
article
it's-
dedicated just for this purpose,
It's fine.
as a control factor.
I would support that.
Either way, the funding's going to be there. But
Absolutely.
it sounds like there's
Absolutely.
you
Well, we haven't
recommend a better way to
agreed
do it.
on all of the other numbers yet, so
Okay.
there might be some give and take here.
All right. Anything else? All right.
Thank you
Bill,
very
Pam,
much.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to have if the golf committee would come forward, please. They have an application for golf course improvements. I'm also going to move up the continued discussion of the process for renaming of the St. Mark's Golf Course from other matters. It seems to make sense. Would love to get their opinion on some possibilities for renaming. Andre, welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Pilecki, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Who wants to begin?
Andre's going to do most of the talking here.
All right.
A little bit of moral support. He's been working with the the CPC to
Okay.
secure some funding for the golf course.
Which is a great idea. I mean, I think it's vitally important that that funding mechanism be utilized. So I look forward to hearing about how it's been going. Sir?
Okay, so I guess I'll start back on January 18th. We made a presentation to this board and to go over the costs for restoring, reactivating golf based on the realities of the large project. And noteworthy in that presentation was that a lot of the funds that were presented were unfunded. In other words, we had no source of funding for the various costs that we deem absolutely vital to get the golf course operating again. Subsequently, in various meetings and committees, we were approached by the chair of CPC and as well as a few members, and they kindly informed us that some of these costs could very well come under the purview of CPC and could be subject for approval, for funding approval. So that's something that we eagerly are pursuing. Specifically, the costs that we are talking about consist of the building relocation, which was given a figure of roughly $300,000. Only $35,000 of that was funded by the public safety building project. So we were left with quite a big hole there. Out of that total, under the category of open space and recreation categories under CPC, we would be able to possibly fund the parking area costs as well as the cost for a retaining wall. And in addition, the cost of renovating and restoring the golf course that was presented by the golf course architect. So that's quite a big, that would be the essential project right there. Restoring the golf holes, the new golf green and the new tees, as well as the new tees and also the parking area and the retaining wall. So under that category, that's the essence of our funding application to CPC for those CPA funds. So that's quite a big chunk because we presented an amount roughly about $640,000, and that, if successful, we would be able to cover at least the $500,000 of that roughly. So Mr. Purple kindly provided revised estimates on the parking area and the retaining wall. And those figures are being finalized right now and will be available to us, I think, tomorrow. But essentially, we have a pretty good idea of what they are, and those will be part of the application that we are going to submit to CPC on Thursday night. So that's the plan. CPC was kind enough to reopen the window for us because usually the request for funding ends in September of 2017, would have ended in September of 2017, but they kindly reopened the window for us so that we can move forward with this and not place the entire burden on the tax-paying citizens in order to get the golf course working again. So that's a tremendous opportunity. And so we come to this board tonight to request that you support this application for CPA funds and that you would also co-sponsor this request. That would be part of a warrant article that would come up for special at town meeting for this funding. So that's where we are.
And again, what's the estimated amount that you think you'll be seeking?
Right now, including a contingency factor, it comes to about $515,000, subject to revisions based on the parking area and retaining wall costs, which we're awaiting from the context architecture people. And we're supposed to get those tomorrow. But they did give us an estimate a pretty good estimate, so it comes to about that.
Okay. And I'll look for the other members' input. I, for one, am incredibly supportive of this initiative. If folks remember last year at annual town meeting, the people that came out in support of both the public safety complex as well as the golf course, it was overwhelming. It was a huge crowd, and it was overwhelming, the amount of support. So I would be more than happy to co-sponsor something like this. I would want to also ensure that it is, the funding is provided with no strings attached, with no other requirements that would be outside of a normal funding request. And I think it's imperative to provide a clean funding request to the town meeting members to ensure it's its best chance of passing. It's too important, to have a fight at town meeting over restrictions that could be put on that kind of funding. So I think a clean funding request is outstanding, and if that's what it is, I'll be more than happy to fully support it. Thoughts from other members?
I agree. A question, is this a borrowing, Brian? Could be. Is that a 2/3 vote? If it's
So
a borrowing?
the answer was it could be a borrowing, and if so, it could be a 2/3 vote.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Ms. Bracchio?
I also support this. I think it's great that the conversations have been able to be had with CPC. Being able to do it this way, I think impacts all the citizens in a very positive way. You're already paying 1% in, so you're not actually looking to see an increase on your tax bill. Being able to use CPC funds, so I am wholeheartedly in support.
Mr. Schifrin?
I too think it's a great way to fund these items. Where are you in the application process with CPC?
Currently, we've been able to fill out the entire application. It consists of at least a dozen questions requiring various information. We're in the process, as I mentioned, of obtaining harder figures in terms of an itemized breakdown that CPC prefers to see. In other words, not just a big lump sum of, parking, so much money, but an itemized breakdown. And the context architecture people have told us that they will provide us that breakdown for both the parking area and the retaining wall. And we're also in discussion with the golf course architect, who will provide a further breakdown of the golf course renovation costs that he's been working on. We already have a partial breakdown. In other words, the ninth hole, the ninth green, the forward tees, and the bunkers, and that. But the more information we have, the better. So we're ready to go. Tomorrow, I'm expecting the figures from context architecture and hopefully some from the golf course architect. We're putting that in the package, in the application, and Thursday evening, CPC is convening a special meeting specifically to discuss this, to discuss our application, and that's at that time, Thursday evening, that we want to present our application. And that's why last Thursday, when we presented this initially to CPC, we were fortunate to have the selectmen there and present, and they guided us to make sure that we had the support of the Board of Selectmen. That was crucial in our efforts to move forward. And so we were able to get on your agenda, and we're very appreciative of the opportunity to have been fitted in tonight to address the board, to ask for this request.
Great, so you should have a completed application in front of them on
Thursday, absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, any other questions? Okay. Anything else?
Yes.
Yes.
You mentioned, Mr. Chairman, that you wanted perhaps some input from our side
Yes.
regarding the naming
Yeah,
of the golf
thoughts on
course.
that.
We had, in a meeting that we've had, we discussed the topic, and we came to the unanimous conclusion that the name of the golf course would ideally be the Southborough Golf Club, because it ties into the historical or the history of the land. Initially, when it was owned by the Gardner family,
Mr. Gardner. It was operational as a golf course. It's in the historical records. There are excerpts from stories about games and wages and so on, and it was called the Southborough Golf Club. And it was only after the land was given to the St. Mark's School that it became St. Mark's Golf Course. So I think naming it the Southborough Golf Club really, it almost like completes the picture, finishes the story, brings it back to its roots. So I think that would be, it rolls off the tongue very well as well. And then the abbreviation SGC is also, it's not cumbersome.
Yeah.
So that would be what we would support.
Okay. I'd love to get some initial thoughts, and then maybe we can, solicit any other input from members of the community, and hopefully, if this board meets, maybe at our February 27th meeting, we try to move forward on something. Other thoughts? I love the name. I think it does flow well, and I love the historical context of it as well. Ms. Fana?
I'm supportive of that. We don't have the luxury of time on this, but I would like to have an opportunity there for the residents to send comment to this board, but I think it's imperative that this board make a decision at their next meeting. If there's concern over, the chosen direction that you're going in as far as the name, I think we need to at least give a window of opportunity for people to comment, but the decision should be made at our next meeting on the 27th.
Just as a
Mr.
small
Pilecki.
addition, the committee has a pretty nice historical package that we can present to support this that might be kind of interesting as background to the citizens in
If
this
you
decision.
could, through Mr. Purple, I think it'd be great to have that as part of our packet for our next meeting.
We
Or
can do
put
that.
it online.
Even
For now?
As well, we
it
can
can
post
go
that
up,
as well.
yep.
Sure.
Great idea. Thank you, Mr. Pilecki. Ms. Bracchio?
I support both the opinions of my counterparts. I also would like to see the public put some input, but I'd like to see it done at the 27th as well. Thank you.
Mr. Schifrin?
Just curious, in coming up with that, did the management company weigh in at all in that, or was it just your group?
We've had public input at our meeting when we've discussed that name and with a couple of the current employees of the management company, and they both thought that it was a good name. So have I had direct contact with, is it Bill Williamson, right?
Bill Harrison.
Bill Harrison?
Yeah.
No.
I would just want his opinion of whatever is put in front of us. It's ultimately them that have to market it, and I think from discussions with them, the name has a lot to do with how it connects with people in their marketing, which ultimately will lead to the success of the course. So I would just want to hear his opinion of whatever we decide to go forward with.
Sure, we'd be happy to reach out
I
to
think
him.
that suggestion sounds like a great idea, and hopefully he's on board with it.
But
Thanks.
We'll do that.
Excellent. Anything else, gentlemen?
I
All right, well,
I do have one
Yes, sir.
one thing. Yeah, there's an old Hebrew saying, "He who adds subtracts," and I unfortunately have to take that role. We still have a funding gap for those items that are not covered by the CPC, and we're trying to roll those up into a further, probably likely a town article to fund those little extras, such as the utilities, the foundation for the moving of the clubhouse, and things like that, that are not covered by CPC.
And that would amount to about a little over $200,000 or $210,000 per our current figures, which is certainly a lot less than $640,000 that we were facing back in January. So
And we still have to present those, sir.
okay. And is that a warrant article that the Board of Selectmen would sponsor?
There is a placeholder for that at this point, yes.
Good. Excellent.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Ballantyne, we're going to have a fiscal 2019 budget recommendation. Presentation, I trust, sir. All right, Mr. Ballantyne, welcome. I know there are some members of the advisory committee here as well. I see the chairman, Mr. Peters, welcome. Other members, welcome, and let's play.
Good evening.
Evening, sir.
So this is an update to our budget that we did in December, which is a very tough start. I think we were in a tough spot back then, and a number of things have either been revised, reduced, moved, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to help us get to a manageable level. So we were tasked with getting down to a 4.5% and a 3.5% budget proposal, and we were able to get down to conversely, a 3.9 and a 3.5%. The difference between those two is very little, which I'll explain. However, we'll roll through this and you can see for yourselves. So the directives were, again, to get through those two budgets and to retain necessary capital items. Maintenance budgets for the most part, no new hours with the exception of the police officer, which happily is included in the, these proposals. And the roads funding and OPEB funding are, of course, high priority. So the initial budget challenges, we had a lot of red lights here. Again, and you've seen this before, but our free cash was down. Local aid and local receipts were level funded initially. Capital requests were a little over $1 million greater than last year. New growth was down. Debt service funding was increased about just shy of $300,000. So all that was appearing ahead of us, and we had an 8.2% tax rate increase estimated back in December. That is now, again, 3.9 and 3.5, much more palatable, I think. So what happened is several things. Local receipts we've increased by $180,000. Some of this is due to some permit fee restructuring we're doing, some better outlooks for motor vehicle excise, and some transfer station funding that we're proposing in this new budget year. Local aid increased 35,000. We'll take it. It's not a huge amount, but it's a good positive thing for the governor's budget. So put that in there, and then some other revenue, which was the ambulance fund we earmarked for a capital item, and the septic fund is a septic fund used for homeowners to pay off their to get loans, and there's money going back and forth. Well, over the years, it's about a 15 or 20 year program. It's accumulated a small balance. I think it's like 40 or 50,000 that's going to be unused. So town meeting can appropriate that against the budget. It's a good thing. The expenses, town budgets came down about 203,000. About 13 different departments through discussion and collaboration were able to shed some funding off of various things. The total school budget, and this includes everything, not just the K-8, it's regional, Assabet, Norfolk, dropped about 5,600. K-8 actually went up a little bit. Assabet revised their numbers, went up a little bit, and then we had some drops with Norfolk and in other areas, so that actually was almost a push. Employee benefits was the big one that we I think me and myself and the town administrator breathed a sigh of relief that wasn't going to be as challenging as we thought. It's still being negotiated. However, we were able to take our major health plan, Tufts, and bring it down 3 or 4 percentage points from what we had estimated, with also a couple of employees off the roster. So that's $250,000. That really helped. The capital budget and articles, again, I know we've talked about this a little bit, but that came down another $500,000 through, again, discussions with various departments. The budget articles, the digital preservation, unfortunately, is not going to live this day, but maybe next year. It's just not a high enough priority to try to get that through. And the debt budget, I had to tweak it because the fire debt is actually paid from fire receipts. So I had to tweak that, and there was some miscellaneous interest that I just adjusted on that. So that was about $54,000 that we adjusted down. So here is the capital summary recommended. What's in red is what we've changed. You can see there's quite a few that are either zero or a lot less after discussions with the facilities manager and the various department heads. Obviously, this doesn't have the 30,000 that we had just talked about in the previous discussion. That will be on there tomorrow, though, tomorrow morning. So that'll be put back in. And so everything else, everyone has pretty much agreed to. There doesn't seem to be anyone that's hopefully not in agreement with making these final recommendations for the capital. So the recommendations to achieve the 3.5% is just all the same as the 3.9%. However, it's, in addition, there'd be some furlough days for non-represented employees, and the road maintenance article, we would suggest cutting down from the 400,000 to the 285. We've really tried to maintain that 400,000, but if we want to go a little further, we're going to have to make some tough decisions. So would recommend at least supporting. We don't, I don't think you'd vote on budgets tonight or anything like that, but we'd like to at least get support for the structure of the budget that this puts forth. It preserves the services, supports the final phase of the police staffing, which is great. Self-funds the transfer station, which, again, I wouldn't get into details tonight. I just want to, hopefully, the board can support the concept of that rather than the details, which would be a discussion for a later date with the Public Works Director and possibly the town clerk. So we would support that. Includes first round of debt issuance for the public safety building. So again, we're going to do that in May. We're going to issue some bonds for about 7.7 million. So that's a good chunk of that third of that project, and supports the high priority capital and road maintenance. The last bullet is just a note that our tax levy will be going down from about 2.7 million or 2.8 million to about 1.4 million estimated under this plan. I don't think there's really any way around that this year. It's gonna, be reduced substantially. So final thoughts, the debt service, the recreation proposal would add about $230,000 to this budget. It's not in here. We can certainly consider that as time goes on. Bless you. It's about 0.5% on the tax rate, by the way. And the golf course expenses, which I was pleased to hear that it seems like a good amount of that may be addressed. So we're holding our breath there, but that also is not in these amounts. Again, we assume the transfer station will be self-supporting. Ms. Galligan did a lot of work on that this past week or so, and I think the final number came closer to the 140 that her numbers showed that we were short in that annually. So there's some thoughts to increase the regular sticker fee, initiate a fee for seniors, fee for second sticker, revisit the early discount program. I mean, there's lots of ways to address that issue. Combinations of changes. Again, that's a deep discussion that we won't get into tonight, but it could be done with various price points in various areas. Again, the regional schools budget is not finalized, so this budget is not going to change much from here on out. However, there are a number of areas that there's going to be small adjustments. For example, I saw some library folks here. The library has some adjustments they're going to need to do for their salary, small amounts, but it's going to have to be revisited, and some new amounts going to appear as a proposed budget for them. That's just an example, but it's small amounts like that are going to change. Possibly other departments may go through some salary things in the next month or two, may update their numbers. It's very small amounts. The health insurance may get adjusted a little bit. It's not going to be 250,000 or anything like that anymore. So this budget is very, very close, or at least in the ballpark of what the final product's going to be. The regional schools vote at the end of February, and the number that we have in there, I have high confidence will be close. I don't know where it will be yet. It's a very more complicated process on the regional level. They've just done some health insurance changes. They have a bunch of local aid changes that Christine, or the superintendent, was going through. So there's a little more work there to be done, but from the first draft, it appears we're gonna be very close on that. So again, health insurance will be continually negotiated. We may have some revisions to that. That could be another discussion, but it won't be a large amount. And we're exposing ourselves a little bit in Norfolk. We haven't had Norfolk agricultural student in close to 8 years, maybe now. It's been a while. There's been a couple here that have put in applications. The problem is we don't know until very late in the budget cycle. I think actually the cutoff might even be actually after the town meeting deadline. So we removed that this year. We've carried it every year. So if a student comes, we're on the hook for it. We're going to have to find that money in the reserve fund or through other available funds. So that's a little bit of an open item that we just have to be aware of. That's pretty much it for the presentation. So I think we're in a good spot that this budget is very close to what it's going to be as proposed. And if the board wants to see anything else other than the 30,000 adjustment or anything that doesn't look good, we should really get going on that.
So the recommendation is a 3.9%
Correct.
increase, which is what I am supportive of. I do have some questions on your final thoughts slide, and it all comes back to the transfer station. So do you have an idea, have you heard of what the transfer station sticker cost may go up to? What it is now and what it may go up to?
It depends. We have some scenarios we initially drafted, very just draft scenario, just fooling around with the numbers a little bit. If you initiate say like a $50 senior sticker fee for one sticker, it doesn't cost so much for the, for the regular stickers. It'd be like a $10 or $15 change. I can't quite remember the exact number. So you can have scenarios that some may argue that's a big jump from 0 to 50. I don't know. But you can have scenarios where the regular sticker will not be impacted much. It depends how you want to cut it.
Yeah, it is that challenge of, I don't want to see our seniors impacted a significant amount either. In fact, an idea is it's a much more reduced cost for our seniors than it would be for someone with, say, with a commercial vehicle that we've all seen those that back up and unload a truckload of stuff into the hopper. And so, hopefully Ms. Galligan, when she comes next opportunity, will have some good ideas for us as to what would be reasonable. So that was my big concern on there. Other thoughts for Mr. Ballantyne? Ms. Fanoff?
Two quick questions, Brian. On the other revenue, there's a $95,133.
Mhm.
Are you saying that we have balances in these two funds that come up with that sum of money that we're using to offset the budget?
One of them, the septic fund, yes. It was about 46,000 that,
And the ambulance fund as well?
the ambulance fund was actually, I can't remember what item it was
Oh,
that we
that's
used
okay.
that for. It may have been, we used it for a specific item, the ambulance fund, funds like the message board, the various, the fire truck, the ambulance. There was something else that we had that funded towards.
The cable,
I'm sorry?
for Carterville Hall? I lost my sheet, sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
I think
Might
it
have
was
been the private fiber.
fiber.
run
What's
to
that
Cornwall
for?
Hall. I'm sorry?
Why is the ambulance fund being used for that?
Well, it's because if it's done, and the town administrator can correct me if I'm wrong, but if it's done, that allows us to, it's a shorter run because the public safety building's right there. So we're thinking any work with the public
Over here?
safety building, right? The new public safety building.
So this money is
This
to
money
be
is,
used?
in a way, if it gets us to that quarter of a road, you know what I mean, the rest of it to get to the public safety building
That's
is,
not
it's
part of the
sort of
project?
public safety related.
But it's not part of the project?
not this part.
It's not part of the project to get us to Corderville. Corderville is where we have our head end for all of our IT stuff. So to be able to connect this building with Corderville will allow us to have better reliability, better speed, and we won't have to pay the least cost that we've been paying for the fiber line.
Okay, the reason I'm asking these questions, because I think there needs to be a conversation as far as what the ambulance fund can be used for. And I look at the detail of, I went through all of the budgets. Ambulance funds, from my understanding, if you're charging mileage, you can offset the gas. If you're billing for that, it should be reimbursing for the gasoline or the fuel. It should be covering the supplies for the ambulance. I see those items in budgets. So I guess I want to know why we're not reducing individual budgets by a charge that people are paying for. I think that needs
Yeah,
to have
it
a
would definitely
conversation
be a
before we start
conversation with the,
spending it somewhere else.
Yeah, it would definitely be a conversation with the chief that we could have. We have been really good, the town, as far as linking that ambulance fund to ambulance-related and medical and fire-related issues, which is good, because theoretically, the town meeting actually has the authority to use it for anything. They could actually raid that fund. I don't want to say raid, but
Well, I
you
know
know,
what you're
they could
saying.
actually use that money for whatever.
And more of a reason it should be an enterprise fund associated strictly to the ambulance.
Yeah, so.
Maybe we need an article for that.
But I think, yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, we can definitely talk to the fire chief and have conversations about maybe what might be in the budget that
I mean,
could help
funds,
offset some of that.
if we're identifying funds for a purpose, it should be strictly for that purpose. If there's money left over and we think something else might be nice, and I'm not saying the cable is necessary, I'm just saying, I don't think that, a message board to me could take second seat to supplies. So I think the conversation needs to be had as to where we're allocating these funds. And I think it needs to happen soon, and I think we need to look into an enterprise fund so that we manage those fees that come in and dedicate them to the purpose that they're being charged off to. So we need
Sounds
another warrant article. I mean, it's easy to take whatever in the budget and shift it to an enterprise fund. If I approve at town meeting $1,000 and 500 of it is for the ambulance, it's easy to take that sum and put it in the enterprise fund, and any money or revenues that come in from the ambulance billing goes into that so we can see the management of the whole ambulance service,
He's
like other towns.
Yeah, the chief and the town accountant have actually done some work the past few years, and we've actually have a little bit better plan on that fund, only because now they have a cash flow that goes out, I think, 10 years. Right now, it fully supports actually his capital plan that he's put in there, and, you know, his ambulance replacement, regular schedule and all that, so that's a good thing. So he's, you know, the chief and the town accountant, myself and Mark have put some work into it, but
Right.
I think what you're suggesting is,
Well, we've talked
suggesting is a
about
little
it
more
for 3
granular
years,
than
and I think
than
it's
we've gone.
something the advisory board should consider.
All right, Ms. Brocchio?
Hi, thank you. Just a couple quick things. First, Mr. Purple and Mr. Ballantyne, you did a tremendous job in putting this together based on the restraints that we asked you to do. So I'm sure I speak for the full board when I say thank you. You had the tougher part before it got to us with making some of these hard cuts, so thank you for that. 2 quick questions, actually 1 question, 1 comment. On the Norfolk, the agricultural funding, what typically, if a student came forward, what would the dollar figure typically be for that we could be on the hook for, per se, if someone came
Probably
forward?
between I haven't checked the
about
tuition rates
about 42,000.
lately, but it's between
42.
40 and 50, yeah, now.
No. And a large portion of that is the
I was just
transportation
gonna say,
cost.
yeah, I took the-
Okay.
It's about evenly split, so if we do have a student who wants to go, we have to budget for the full tuition and the full transportation. However, I know that the superintendent tries to see if there's a way to share, if there's another student who is
Right.
going,
Yep.
and
Right.
we can split those transportation costs.
Okay, and then I would be very interested in seeing on the transfer station the different scenarios that get presented. The fee for the seniors is a little concerning to me, so I'd definitely be looking forward to seeing what comes forward on that. Thank you.
And with that, it'd be great, and again, if Ms. Galligan is listening, so comparisons. So what would it be for a resident to pay the full sticker fee as opposed to going out on the, the local economy and hiring a provider to come pick up? Think it'd be good for the residents to know
Right.
the value that they're getting as compared to what they would have to pay if they went and contracted it for themselves on the outside. Mr. Schifrin?
Yeah, also great job over the last couple months working on this. It seems very daunting in the beginning, and to bring it down to what you presented tonight, I think is very impressive. Just one question, the budget as it's presented in general, will this risk at all our bond rating, do you think, or?
It may, and the reason I say it may is because our actual rating will be before town meeting. So I don't know how they're gonna take that. I know I'm gonna be asked the question by the rating agencies, what is your plans for next year? So, of course, I'll disclose, and they would know that, here are our plans. But since it's not enacted yet officially, I think it's gonna be close. This will be a close one. But I'm hoping that, we're still, besides the levy decrease that we may be facing, we're still very balanced. There's been no reduction in our, even though we have smaller reserves, there's no reduction in that or anything, so. And then the factors that we don't, or we have little control over are still there that help us, the wealth factor, the socioeconomic factors, so those will stay strong. So I think, and we've been still supporting OPEB. There's sort of a story that we can tell to hopefully ensure that that doesn't happen.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Shea?
First, my apologies for being late, missing your presentation. I have no questions at this time.
Okay, all right. Mr. Valentin?
I-
Before I wanted to, anything further, did want to see if Mr. Peters or members of the advisory may have some questions or
Oh,
comments.
I was just going to wrap up by saying they're continuing their budget hearings. We still have a few left. Again, even though I think this is going to be very close, we're 90% something there, there'll still be some ongoing small changes as we go along,
Okay.
just so the board knows.
And I know that we're not voting tonight,
No.
but I think you're getting the general sense. I think the 3-9, where I'm seeing heads nodding, maybe, all right? So we're getting the general sense of where this board is going, which is consistent with your recommendation.
So, Mr. Chairman, I just want to, before you turn it over to advisory, first of all, I just want to thank Brian and the rest of the finance team for the work, that we've been able to do, over the past several months. This year, other than this board with advisory, people wanted into the process earlier and to understand the process earlier. And one of the things you need to understand is when you get in the process earlier, it's ugly. Okay, and so, you got to see a little bit from the ground floor as to where we start and where we end up and the challenges that we have. And like I said, it's good to pull the curtain back and to see that. But there are challenges and, there are certain risks that you assume, with the budget. But again, I think it's been a good process. I think, again, if you want a Cliff Note version of what you've had before you tonight with a 3.9 or a 3.5, a lot of this hinges on the transfer station. If you don't want to make that self-sufficient, okay, that's about $110,000, $140,000 that we need to find. I'll be very honest with you, and I think Brian will say the same thing. That's positions, okay? That's going to be positions. And as much as you want to put a new police officer into this budget, and that's integral for you, I would not recommend cutting existing positions and leaving that in here. And, you know, so that's something you're gonna have to think about. So, you know, I think that this board wants to try and find a way to get where we're looking to try and go in terms of the transfer station. But I just wanted to put that out there because I think, you know, you've understood from the presentation, that's kind of the linchpin to make this work. And, you know, if we can get there, I think it's, you know, helps to preserve the existing services, the existing positions that we do have. Otherwise, I think, you know, we have to go back to the drawing board, you know, for a little bit more work. But hopefully, given the input that we've had from the board tonight, we can begin to put the budget book together and start putting things, and then we can tweak it from there based on the additional discussions moving forward. So, thank you.
Ms. Van?
Just a quick question about the transfer station. When we started the sticker program, it was just an identification program that you lived in town, you pay, I think it was $5 or $10 when we first started that. Everyone bought a sticker. Have we looked at putting the transfer station entirely back into the budget, just to look at it, to see what the impact was? I mean, if we're looking at $140,000 and we don't have it, then we are gonna lose a position or something else. So shouldn't we be looking at it as being a department that needs funding and finding out what the cost of that is as well?
Right.
I don't think we thought that that was probably, well, you're looking at a significant extra expense, I mean, to put into the tax rate.
Well, we don't know because I'm just saying, to demonstrate it.
Might be a good
Because-
exercise.
Well, it also gives us guidance.
Right.
Could.
There has been discussion in the past,
Yeah, I know.
you know, about, you know, just putting it in the tax rate.
But we need to demonstrate what that is, so if we run short, we can explain why. Town meeting decided not to do it as a tax-covered department, and we need to, this board needs to make some tough decisions after town meeting.
You could,
We can do that,
We
you
can
know,
do that.
we can
We
do
can-
that exercise, absolutely. We'll make that as
Just thinking
part
that
of
through a
the,
little
part of
bit.
the
Yeah,
information
yeah,
that comes
that's
back to this board.
I mean, even if it's a non-binding question, it needs to be asked. I mean, we have, because we're gonna be faced with a decision to find $140,000.
Mr. Schifrin?
So from
find
my,
it?
oh yeah,
Brian,
problem solved. Well, kind of. I mean, from my first pass at the budget, I have always been in favor of the transfer station being self-sufficient from the people that use it. And frankly, I was kind of surprised to find out that it wasn't. So, what I'm expecting to see along the lines of what you were looking for is that whatever the number is that makes it self-sufficient, there will still be significant value there to the people that use it. And hopefully that's without impact on the seniors. Another question I had budget-related was there are items outside of the budget, recreation, and now potentially the senior center, that'll be separate warrant articles. If those pass, do you know what that would bring our percentage increase to, and how would that affect
So
what
the,
we're doing?
yeah, so if you're operating from a 3.9, Brian has taken a look, let's look at the golf. You've got about $981,000 in that article that they're looking for. We don't have the ability to fund $981,000 in this budget.
recreation, right?
I'm sorry, recreation. So,
Golf, I don't remember that one.
sorry, yeah, so, Brian has worked with our financial advisor to come up with a 5-year bond, you know, which is about $238,000 a year for 5 years. That's about 0.5%. So you're looking at, you know, a 3.9 to a 4.4. $30,000 really isn't much, you know, so maybe it's a, you know, maybe it's 4.42, you know, 4.4, you know, something along those lines. So a 4.41, you know, it's really not that much of an impact in terms of the $30,000 piece. So it's about $400,000 is a percent
Okay.
on the tax rate.
So if those items are supported at town meeting, then it is manageable?
Town meeting is determined it's manageable.
Okay.
So if town meeting passes say town meeting passes the budget as presented with the capital, as presented in the capital plan, okay, that is a 3.9% tax increase the town meeting is voting on. If they vote, any golf improvements that are not funded from CPA, that are not funded from other sources, that have to come from the general fund or borrowing, that's on top of it. The 30,000 for the senior center is on top of that. The borrowing for the recreation programs is on top of that. And town meeting then gets to make that value choice as to, is this something that we want to pay for in addition to everything else?
Thank you.
Yep, Ms. Bracchio.
Expanding on what Brian asked, if the senior center and the recreation funding goes forward, I know Brian asked about the bond rating and such, how will that potentially, or will it not potentially, based on the percentage of 0.5%, will that affect the bond rating? No, perfect.
No,
I just wanted to be clear on that.
I think the
Thank you.
big, if you remember the discussion that we had about when we got our AAA bond rating, we were able to convince the rating agency that our unused levy capacity combined with our smaller than really what they want to see reserves, cash reserves, combined, really gave us a strong position in terms of having available funds. Now we're taking that unused levy capacity down from about 2.8, we're taking it down, about 1.4, which is a fairly steep reduction. How are they going to look at that now? As Brian said, we will be going out, to bond, to market before town meeting, but they're still going to ask the question, and does that have a chance of affecting that bond rating?
Thank you.
Ms. Spaniff.
Last question, I promise. Personnel Board, have they taken a vote on any percentages, any surprises there with numbers that are going to come?
No, Personnel Board has taken a position, with a 2.25%
And they're already in the
increase.
budgets?
That's already in here. One of the things the Personnel Board did this morning, there is a plan in here from Library for a new Assistant Director position. They're restructuring that a little bit from, for some of the part-time hours to help craft it from a vacant position, from a vacancy right now. The grading of that position is a little bit higher. The Personnel Board, in working with their consultant, they said it's this, and Library thought it should be something less. Obviously, the increased grade is going to mean probably another, I think it was $3,100, so that adjustment will need to be made into the budget.
Thank you for all of your work.
Other thoughts?
I mean, this is a different process than I'm used to, so that's what I thought we were doing tonight. But
All right.
thank you.
Okay, Mr. Peters, welcome.
Is this on?
It is, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Adrian Peters, I chair advisory. I would like Brian to just put back the last sheet if it's possible. Firstly, I'm speaking as a chair. I will ask questions and make a comment or two. But we will have, as advisory, a separate meeting where we will address the budget. So I'm not going to go before we have a proper meeting. However, I just want to go to the last page.
Final thoughts, right?
Thank you. Firstly, the sticker issues is I'd really would like Brian to. If you say it's 110, I mean we must know what the total revenue is from the stickers right now. And if I add 110 to 140, I know exactly what the percentage increase would be. That you can then divvy up any which way you want to. But do we know what the total revenue is now? It's just a question.
Yeah, it was right around 300,000, I think.
Say again?
300,000, somewhere just north of that, I think.
Okay, that means it would be, 110, 120 on 300,000, Mr. Chairman, which the increase would be, depending on how they divvy it up. So the current sticker price is?
220,
250.
250 now?
Yeah.
250.
So you can work out simply how much the increase is.
Roughly, yeah.
I do want to say that, I mean, it's easy to divvy it up. I just want to, what I see, And think I speak for all of us, is, we talk about 3.9. There are some increases coming for salaries. There's the 30,000. There's this and that may come in. If we add that, we do work on the fact that we may not have the sticker increase. It's politically very sensitive, so I'm just looking at it. We're looking at 4.5, 4.6, 4.7. I'm shooting from the hip in tax increase. So, and I think, the Board of Selectmen should consider that and when we go into session, we would like to have a read on where the Board of Selectmen stands on the transfer station stickers and what they support in the warrant articles, so that we can get some feedback as to where we're gonna go. Because at the end of the day, the tax increase is going to be there. Doesn't matter how we present it. And I think it'll have repercussions. So we will look at it in our own way. I don't know whether there's anything else, but we will have a meeting soon on it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Mr. Ballantyne, any closing remarks, sir?
We will be in touch. We will definitely give
Be here.
another update, so stay tuned.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
All right. Do you want me to do the Public Works? The Public Works, from Jason? That
Yes.
update?
Do you have that?
All right. All right. So I just have under the chairman's report, I do want to provide an update from the Public Safety Building Committee. Mr. Malinowski couldn't be here tonight, but he asked me to provide a very short update. They are working with the Planning Board and Town Council to wrap up the final order of conditions so that we can proceed to bid in early March. The new cost estimate is expected this week, and the PSBC will have a discussion on that at their meeting posted for Monday night, February 12th at 6 p.m. here at the Townhouse. This will be the final cost estimate prior to proceeding to bid. The PCSB will alert the board if there is anything outside the messaging delivered in December. In the meantime, they're working through the pre-qualification process. The town has received 13 general contractor submissions and 102 subcontractor submissions for various trades. They are thrilled with the overwhelming response to date. A subcommittee in conjunction with the owner's project manager and designer is working this week to score the submissions so that a final list can be determined of who will be invited to bid. They continue to work collaboratively with the golf committee to make sure they have all the data that they need to facilitate their submissions to CPC and potential town meeting warrant articles, as well as are looking ahead to the construction phase for this summer. And that's their update.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right? Mr. Purple.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I just have two quick items this evening, one of which I just wanted to inform the board. There was a brief meeting of permitting staff yesterday, a proposal that was brought forward by Bill DePietri for a development of an office building up at the Park Central site. He has a tenant up there at this point that is looking to expand and looking to develop somewhere between 100 and 160,000 square foot office building up in the Park Central location. It's a tenant's been there for about 14 years. And it's would mean a significant increase in the number of employees. This is, we talk about revenue, sources and new growth and things like that. Based on the size of the building and things of that nature, the commercial tax impact, it could be between $200,000 and $300,000. That doesn't even get into the personal property tax. So that is something that the permitting boards Planning, Conservation, are taking back, and Zoning Board, because there would require some variances and things of that nature. And the permitting boards are taking an initial look at this and seeing what the issues may be. And I think that, you could probably distill it down to one word, which is traffic. And that is, the issue with that parcel. That's going to be the issue with that parcel. I know that Mr. DePietri has reached out, and the owner of the business has reached out to the state and to the governor's office to see if there isn't some way that they can provide some assistance to mitigate any traffic issues. But again, right now, I bring this to your attention simply because it's going to start, I think Planning Board had a brief update on it last night. It's going to start there'll be some discussions had, but at this point, Mr. DePietri is simply trying to gauge the climate for trying to get this done, and what the hurdles will be, and whether or not, there's a willingness to try and get over those hurdles. You had your finger on the button halfway through the.
I don't know, I may have missed it, I don't know if I want to ask the question. How does this relate to?
Completely separate.
So
Separate and distinct from anything else that was on the table.
So both could theoretically proceed?
Yes. This is a completely separate proposal from anything that is currently moving through the courts in the appeal process. So,
Can I just ask her?
Sure.
Just to clarify, Mark, I know what you're talking about. When you say the permitting boards are looking at this, can you explain who they are and how they do that now?
Sure. Planning, Conservation, Zoning Board of Appeals. Normally, and having this conversation with the town planner, normally an applicant will come before planning in an informal, not as an advertised hearing, but just to have an informal discussion with planning to kind of present the issue and get some initial feedback. I think that Karina has asked Mr. DePietri to come in and to do that, and I think that that's the way that he would be moving, and I don't know whether he would do that with zoning but I know that obviously the variances would need to be sought first, so zoning would be his first stop. He would need to apply to the building inspector would deny it, send it to ZBA for the variances, and then it would go for site plan approval to
All right, so
planning.
all informal discussions have taken place with planning board.
No, informal discussion, it's not been on the agenda as an informal discussion at this point yet. It was broached by the town planner at the meeting last night, simply in the same way that I'm broaching it
All
with you
right,
this
as
evening.
long, I just want the public to know there have been no discussions at any board meetings
Correct.
on this
No.
topic.
No.
Okay,
No.
thank
But
you.
I'm mentioning it to you tonight. It was mentioned publicly at planning board last night. I wanted to at least make the board aware that this discussion is ongoing, with staff, and will be happening to some level at some of the boards. Okay?
Thank you.
Mark, if I can just ask one quick
Absolutely.
question on that. The access point, I know that there's talks with the state, you may or may not know this, the access point for that building, would it be through where Cumberland Farms comes out, or would it be the access point through, there's kind of two Park Centrals, there's Park Central, where Red Roof is, and
Right.
that's called Park Central, or then there's the potential development. Would it be, where would the access point
I
be?
think the big issue, Lisa, is going to be that the state does not want to allow traffic to come back out of Park Central Drive onto Route 9 westbound, because you're coming into what is basically a designated lane for people exiting onto 495 North. So you're going to force you're back to the same issue in a different, for a different project on the same
No,
property.
I agree, they're different projects,
Right.
but I'm just trying to
No,
figure
no,
out
no,
where
no,
the
but it's the
initial
same-
talks.
But it's the same issue,
Okay.
and there has been some discussion, about the possibilities of, entertaining another north-south road, from the parcel up through along 495, back out to Route 30. That has its challenges. We've talked about the potential of a MassWorks grant. I'm sure Mr. Shea is familiar with, those. Ashland actually received a MassWorks grant, which is what is helping to fund those improvements for their indirect water connection, MWRA, through Southborough, which we're going to benefit from some of the improvements that will be made. So that's a possibility.
And will you keep us updated on any, as far as the state and DOT and, you know, anything that may come out of that? I would assume you'll keep us
Absolutely,
updated
and
on.
that's one of the things I think that, you know, you heard MAPC earlier this evening. I think that's one of the things that, you know, it'd be great to brainstorm,
Yeah.
you know, and said, look, we've got a difficult parcel here, which is probably the last large parcel that you can do industrial, commercial, or residential development. It has access issues. You know, what are some ways that we may be able to try and address these things? And any help, I think we understand from some of the discussions we had prior to Park Central, is that any access issues, you know, and any help coming from the state, you know, through their planning processes are a decade away. By the time it gets into the plan, by the time it gets into the funding schedule, you know, so, you know, it may be that we have to look, you know, to our own solutions, to our own devices to try and.
I was kind of
try and help
hoping there might be some way to alleviate some of the whole problems in general with the state being involved, but I guess that's probably wishful
No,
thinking on my part.
we need their assistance, but I think we're gonna need to carry the water, you know, on some of that ourselves.
Fair enough, thank you.
One other piece for the board, I do have a request that I had spoken about with Ms. Gillespie from Open Space, and I got it this afternoon. The Open Space Preservation Commission, they have their annual Winter Wonderland that they do each year. I'm not sure how long they've done this.
Long time.
Long time? Okay. And it's usually up at Chestnut Hill. And this year, since the town now owns the golf course, they would like to host the annual Winter Wonderland on Sunday, February 25th at the golf course, and are requesting from the board, first of all, permission to do so. Secondly, that if the event, if there's snow and everything, if they can just make sure that the parking lot is plowed, you know, the gate is open for the event. We do, at this point, plow the lot simply to provide access to the golf management company for their staff, so they're able to go in, check the building, make sure there are no issues. There's also an additional request that, you know, the gate be left open during daylight hours the rest of the winter, so that parking is available for people who want to use the property for passive recreation. This leads to another issue. When St. Mark's owned the property and the golf season was done for the year, the gate would be closed, the gate would be locked. We haven't done any of that, and that's something that, you know, we haven't had a discussion about as to whether the gate should be closed or not. You know, is it something we want open during the day? Is it something that we want to lock at night? So anyway, so that's probably a separate discussion, but that is something that was mentioned in here. I think at this point, the request on the table from Open Space would be to host their annual Winter Wonderland on Sunday, February 25th.
I'm fine with it.
How many people has anyone attended that? How many people generally go?
I can, Dan. Over the years, it varies. It depends on the weather. Open Space had done it at Chestnut Hill Farm. There's been upwards of anywhere from, sometimes it might be 20 people, because it's always at the end of vacation week. So, you know, you have the hurdle of people coming home, but there have been times with sledding, and even last year it was kite flying because there wasn't a whole lot of snow. And there were upwards of, with the Boy Scouts, I would say close to 80 people there. So it can be anywhere from 20 to more, but where you're now doing snowshoeing, you're kind of opening that up to another segment of the population as well. So there typically is a decent turnout for it. And it's been going on for as long as I was on Open Space, and that was 15 years.
So my only question, yes, it'll be available for everyone's use for passive recreation going forward, well, right now, and going forward. Normally, you're not gonna have 80 or up to 80 people every Saturday or every Sunday. And my guess is normally you'll have onesies, twosies out there. Is there any issue at all about the golf course itself, the fairways, the greens? I know it's wintertime, but that many people on the golf course, does anyone have any concerns about that? I want to raise it and at least have a discussion about that, because I don't want to see that happen either.
Yeah, I think we should get feedback from the management company on this specific request, And then also feedback from management, DPW, police and fire on the idea about having the gate open, all the time for people to go in there and see if there's any issues or problems or things that we should address in order to do that.
Mr. Shea, thoughts?
No, I agree with Brian. So, again, I'm not saying no to this at all, but I
So the
just
only-
think
the only
we need to
thing
run
is,
it by the management
I think
company.
it's happening on, they want to do it on February 25th. Our next meeting's February 27th. So,
If you want to approve the request conditional upon, discussing it with the management company, and the management company doesn't have any issues
that's number one.
regarding the golf course.
Police and fire.
Police and fire. I also, I want to know that there's, there won't be any, and I don't know what goes on. Is it a hike? Is it snow? Is there things that could,
It
if there's
depends on
snow
whether
on
there's
it,
snow
who
or not.
cares? But if there's no snow, that's my concern. It is a golf course, and normally you wouldn't have that many people at one time. That's my only concern. So, can that be alleviated by, in time for them to, who would have
Well,
that say? Maybe the golf course management committee, if they say they don't see an issue with upwards of 80 people on the course?
Well, I don't think that, with all deference to the golf committee, I don't know that the golf committee really.
No,
You know,
the management company.
Yeah, absolutely, the management company, but again, this wacky winter we've had, if the ground's frozen, it's probably less of an issue. If, we
The
get.
ground's wet, it could
If
be
we
a real
get,
issue.
if you get a lot of rain and everything in that, I don't know. I honestly can't answer the question, and I would defer to Mr. Harrison, who is going to understand best. We kind of have to honor his concerns simply because his company is in charge of managing that property.
I wouldn't have a problem approving it subject to the management company's approval and leave it up to the group that's doing it to get that approval. And if they.
Well, no,
would-
I think we can get the approval, but they'll put the conditions. In other words, I think, Mr. Harrison could say, obviously, there's no access to the clubhouse, there is,
I think
we
that
asked.
group has to work with the management company, so the management company knows what they want to do there and can approve or deny certain things. And we can just put
Based on the
it,
conditions of the,
yeah,
of the course at the time of the event. And maybe there needs to be the backup of having it where it normally is. Again, I'm not adverse to it. I think I just don't want to see anything happen to the course itself if the conditions could cause that, that number of people to cause
right.
some damage.
We would be approving what they want to do, subject to the management company's approval. So if certain things aren't approved by the management company, then they can't do them.
I'm all right with that.
So you're still, so let me just make because I agree with what you just said, I just want to make sure it was consistent all the way through. So you want to approve it consistent with, what the management company wants, so you're still retaining the approval
Yep.
of it, but you want to make sure that the management company is okay with that, and if they have any conditions.
Correct.
Okay, all right, I understand.
Let me just ask, though, in the past, people have used the golf course for snowshoeing when it was St. Mark's, and St. Mark's didn't have a problem with it. I guess I'm just concerned about, to some degree, what the difference is between, people go out there and snowshoe now. I've seen people in storms, you see kids sledding. So are we then going to stop everything happening on the land and saying, you can't sled, you can't do this, because we're worried we have to check with the management company? I just want to be clear, if we're setting a path and a course for a process, I guess, I'm a process person, and I can't help it. If we're setting a process for going forward for people using and utilizing for passive recreation, I think we just need to be clear as all.
Yes,
I
Ms.
think-
Faniff.
I don't think we're trying to set a process, Lisa. I think there's an unknown here, because it is a golf course, and this winter season has been so unpredictable. It's really wet, and if it's not wet, there's a lot of ice, so I don't know if I'd be happy with individuals tracking across on ice with children.
We now own the
I mean,
liability.
Right.
That's my
I
biggest
mean,
issue.
I'm open to them using it, but I think in fairness to, we have a warrant article
Agreed.
to redo a golf course, we really need to protect what we have before we start adding to it.
And-
I'm not in favor of it being opened at night, that gate,
I'm not either.
under any situations.
No, and that's,
I think that's another,
no, and any request to have it open is only during daylight hours, so that's, again,
so can we
You can get
agree
public
that
works
if the
in.
management company feels comfortable, like Brian
Yeah.
Schiffern was saying, and it's reasonable, then we're okay with it. But if there's an obstacle there as far as keeping the golf course,
I think I'm just talking about this one event.
That's all I'm
Yes.
talking
Yeah.
about.
Same here.
So this would have nothing to do with or
Anything
change
else?
the ability for somebody to go snowshoeing out there tomorrow.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that,
Yeah.
because
We're
we're
only talking
talking
about
about
the
that.
volume and what
Right.
Fine,
could,
I'm fine
damage
then.
that could happen to a golf
Right.
course based on the volume, that's it.
and
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 it's
I-
an
I
it's an
think it's
organized
le-
activity.
and I think it's, you know, and Mr. Kalenda said this at the beginning, there's less of an issue if there's snow.
Of course,
If there's
of
snow
course.
out there, I think it's less of an issue. I think if there's no snow, then obviously, you know, or the conditions are wet or mucky, then obviously it changes it, so.
And one of the reasons for me even bringing it up is I think it's a wonderful opportunity before town meeting for people that may not understand what passive recreation or being able to utilize it. I think
Right.
any opportunity to bring people out to see once again, how wonderful it is, not that we don't all already know. It's just an opportunity, that's all. So I fully support as well asking.
And you need to remember that, you know, the request and plowing the parking lot and everything in that's only gonna be for the next several months. That whole site is gonna change,
Oh.
you know, once construction and everything starts, that whole thing,
Yep.
you know, that now we have a completely different discussion, and that's gonna be, something that will have to be, you know, taken care of in future years.
And on plowing the lot even, I don't know that you need to plow the whole lot. I mean, at any given time, I can't imagine there being more than, like Chestnut Hill Farm, it's a very small lot there. I can't imagine you having more than a few cars there,
Yeah.
short of an event,
Yeah.
at any given time. So I don't necessarily agree with plowing the whole lot
Right.
for the rest of the summer. I mean, winter, sorry. Oh my gosh, it's been a
Right.
long night.
So you'll check with the management company and see if they can, if their comfort level with that number of people based on the conditions, and they may have to revise that input when it gets closer
Right.
to the event.
So two questions.
backup
Roughly a
plan would be a good
Roughly a
idea.
number of, Lisa, rough number of people?
Again,
No.
it's hard to
Between 50
say.
and 100?
It depends
How's
on the
that?
weather, for one thing.
Yeah.
I think 100's way too much. I think you're probably looking with, if the Boy Scouts are gonna come and do their hot chocolate, you're gonna have them. I think with kite flying last year, because there wasn't a lot of snow, I think we had upwards of 40, maybe 45 people there, including the Boy Scouts and
Okay.
the leaders and,
So less than 50 people?
yeah,
Yeah,
probably,
fine.
is a fair
So,
number, Mark.
you know, I think there needs to be a vote of the board, you know, similar to what Mr. Schifrin suggested, that, you know, that the board is approving the request conditional upon any requirements, you know, by
Fine.
of that of the management company.
I'll second Mr. Schifrin's statement.
Any other discussion?
And we're not tying, you know, whether that we open up the gate daily into this decision. That, I think we need to look at separately.
No, I can get, based on the feedback from the board this evening, I'll get the impact, you don't want it open at night.
Right.
You've made that clear.
Correct.
I will get the input from Public Works, Public Safety, and the Golf Committee and the management company, and then bring that all back to you, and you can make that decision at a separate time.
Okay.
Okay?
Motion's been made, seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, excellent, thank you. Anything else?
Yes.
Please.
So you have in front of you, well, I'm sorry. Do you wanna, I'm sorry, I'm
Well, we
jumping
have
ahead.
I didn't know if you're done with your report.
I am done with my report, Mr.
So we'll
Chairman.
do the consent agenda items. Does anyone want to hold any of the 1 through 7?
Oh my God, hello, Miss Lady.
Can we do number 3?
You want to hold number 3, or do you want to
Yeah.
do number 3?
What?
Can we do number 3?
Yeah, just like pull it out separately.
We shall. So we'll start with 1 and 2. So I'll move that we approve the meeting minutes from December 5 and December 19, 2017, and that we accept a donation of $2,925 from participants in the Gobble Wobble race towards Recreation Department expenses. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, then then I'll go through, that we approve 4 through 7. 4 is we're going to appoint Scott Raylander to the Municipal Technology Committee with a term to expire 6/30/19. We'll appoint William Estrada to the Scholarship Committee with a term to expire 6/30/18. We'll appoint Dana Grosso to the Southborough Emergency Planning Committee as primary Dell EMC representative, no term expiration, and then we'll nominate Jennifer Condon as Animal Control Officer. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, anyone want to take number 3?
Yeah,
Mr.
only
Schifrin,
because
please.
Mr. Sandberg is here and attended the entire meeting, so I just wanted to thank him for coming and agreeing to serve on this committee. He was one of a dozen or so that interviewed and was selected by the committee to serve, so I just wanted to thank you again, and I don't know if anybody else had any questions or if you had anything you wanted to say, so.
I don't have a question, just a comment of thanks. This committee has been a work in progress for quite some time. It took a lot for us to get to this point. We now have 2 individuals that have been appointed to serve on it. It is a challenge often to get volunteers, and we thank you for volunteering for this very important committee. Again, a lot of work was done and a lot of challenging conversations back and forth, all of them, though, towards a good common end of getting to an MTC, and we're thrilled that it's being filled with solid volunteers. So thank you, sir.
Welcome, Larry.
All right? Welcome. And so we're all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Excellent.
No turning back, now you're gonna get sworn in.
And in fact, you never know, Mr. Hegarty could be downstairs, still swear you in tonight. Okay, finally, close to final, we have the closing of the warrant. Mr. Purple.
Mr. Chairman, so you have on your table in front of you a list of the articles or placeholders that have been submitted for the warrant this year. Many of them are annual articles that are dealt with. Some of them do have some language that is in draft form. Obviously, some of it is repetitive language that is dealt with, every year. I'm looking for the board to close the warrant this evening based on the articles that have been submitted. If you would like me just to run through them quickly, I can do that, and I will do it quickly and note the articles that are, no, you're okay.
We have it here.
You do have it here, but I do want to at least point out the ones that are different from the ones that you had in front of you. They're obviously the engineering design for the senior center for the $30,000. That is going to be added as a separate article based on the discussion this evening. There was an article submitted by the school committee to establish a regional school stabilization fund. They're not looking to put any money in this year. This is something that the bond agencies have suggested to them that they should do, similar to we set up our OPEB trust fund for health insurance. And there is the article that advisory asked to bring forward to establish a consent agenda for the town meeting warrant, which would be a bylaw change. Those are the changes that you have seen in here. Mr. Shea, just one more?
I may have an alibi.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. Shea had discussions with him about, don't look confused, about the recreational marijuana bylaw that was passed. There is, here it's listed, as 27. You currently have bylaws on the books. If you remember at town meeting, we did a bylaw to zone recreational marijuana, the same as we did for medical. We also did a bylaw to ban sale of it completely in town. I'm having conversations with town council at this point as to whether or not we need to eliminate one or the other in terms of how we want to address that issue. Preliminary conversations with town council have been that since Southborough did not vote in support at the ballot for this on the state ballot, we therefore can then simply do a bylaw to ban it outright, which you've already done.
And the one thing that I remembered from the ballot initiative that was passed.
Right.
And we had made this statement at a couple of meetings, I believe, with past boards. There was a provision in that, the ballot initiative that communities could put an item on the ballot this upcoming November election
State ballot, yeah.
to ban it or prevent or prohibit recreational marijuana in their community. And
That's
if,
changed
and
now.
I know that that initiative has undergone a complete rewrite, so I have no idea how it stands now, but I just didn't want to miss out on our opportunity to dot an I, cross a T, and so if there's still an opportunity to get it on the ballot, if we need to, let's get it on the ballot and
So the answer
Done
for
with it
that,
once and
town
for all.
council has said we don't, because
Okay.
that has gone the way of the dodo bird.
that's fine.
The question now is whether whether you can keep both bylaws that you did last year, on the books for recreational marijuana. You've banned outright sales, but you've also zoned it the same that you've done for medical, or does one have to, does the zoning have to go away, the ban stays, vice versa? So that is in here. Now, understand that these are placeholders. I've got one in here for CPA projects. I think CPA is bringing forward 5 to 6 projects, so obviously that will fill in.
And that includes the parcel of land bounded by the Pike, Rock Point, and Hubley?
Yes, yeah, Halloran property, yes. And town council is taking a look at that right now, especially the access issue, which I know was something that the board was concerned with. So some of these are, may come to fruition as articles, but some of these are placeholders right now that, for example, planning board is looking at some over 55 development, potentially adjusting that bylaw a little bit. If it comes to fruition, it comes to fruition. If not, then it'll be something that'll be removed in the final version. So we try to make sure there's placeholders in here for everything that may become an article, so that the board doesn't have to open up the warrant again, unless you really want
Ms.
to.
Fana.
An enterprise fund for the fire department, you write an article, we can postpone it at town meeting.
Enterprise fund for fire department?
Ambulance.
Well, you said fire departments,
Well,
okay.
Managed
And-
by the same department.
And I'd like to gauge the board's interest in whether or not we want to revisit the warrant article to change the town administrator to a town manager. I believe that work has been done on that initiative years back. I think it failed by 3 votes, if I remember right. And I think some of that was, in my estimation, was fear of the unknown at the time. So I wanted to see if folks were interested in a Board of Selectmen sponsored article about making the position to a town manager position. From my perspective, I've seen, in fact, it was demonstrated tonight, some of the incredible work that's done on the budget in particular, and the budget book that we get, the whole budget process, which is much different than we've ever had, which comes, which we've seen in a AAA bond rating, his negotiating skills with our unions, which have demonstrated significant amount of savings for the town, health insurance costs and whatnot, work on public safety in the Main Street project. I mean, there's a litany of things that, to me, demonstrate that this position can and should be a town manager position. And I wanted to see if there was appetite to revisit that. Ms. Fana?
Could we put a placeholder on the warrant and distribute the bylaw as it was written 4 years ago for comment from this board on the 27th, if we have an agenda that can accommodate that?
Other thoughts on that? Mr.
Just to review it.
Go ahead.
Mr. Schifrin?
I'm certainly open to revisiting it. I don't know if there can be a distribution before the next meeting or a presentation, pros and cons,
Yeah.
differences. I'm just not,
I'm not saying we take a vote, but to have it, our next meeting's not till the 27th.
Yeah.
It should be on the town website that we're actually going to be discussing it.
Yeah.
And get input, yes.
I guess my
agree with
point
you.
is that I don't know enough about it to say whether or not I have an opinion for or against it.
Yeah, with some new
But I'm
members
open
on the
to it.
board,
Yeah.
so I think that would be smart. Mr. Shea?
So I was a strong proponent of going to the town manager form of government all those years ago. and don't disagree with the thing you said, and I'm in favor of the approach that we have. I guess my only concern is it going to be perceived as just too late in the game for this? And should we have started working on, at least, getting the bylaw out there for people to see, holding meetings on it, hearings on it sooner
I mean,
than now?
the interesting
I
part
just
on-
think we just run the risk of, a lot of people stepping forward, who don't remember discussions from 4 years ago, saying,
And I just,
we're not
I
ready
may
for
be
this.
misgauging this one, that I don't know that it'd be a big controversy this time. I mean, not that it was a big controversy last time. I think it was more of that, again, that fear of the unknown. Well, why are we doing this? I think we're moving to a 5-person board. Do we need a town manager? From my own perspective, what I've seen is that there is great efficiencies that can be gained by having a town manager be able to still do a lot of the work that we should not have to do at these meetings. Our meetings with 5 members, to me, haven't gotten shorter, they've gotten longer. I would like to see fewer agenda items that we can really focus our energies on, and instead have a town manager be able to deal with things that we shouldn't have to spend, 45 minutes on per agenda item, because the town manager's already taken care of it. We still handle those issues that we were required by law to handle, but the town manager could do more.
Mhm.
And I think that could make us all the more efficient. So I don't know that I'd at least like to look at it and see, the pros and cons. Would this make sense? And if we did sponsor it, we could get some public opinion on it. We could, and whether or not it's something that would be of value to the town.
No, and I think we're both on the same page on this. I just think that if we propose it, I want to make sure it passes.
Yeah.
And not that I see it as all that controversial, it's change, and it's the one thing I've picked up on, is people in this town are hesitant to implement big change, and maybe having gone the approach that we have, we went to a stronger town administrator. It is a more logical choice in people's minds to transition now to the town manager as well. But I just want to make sure we're all on top of it, and we have every
Yeah.
question answered, and it passes if we propose it.
Would folks be in favor of at least looking at the materials and at least having a placeholder for it? If we end up not wanting it, we can not do it. What do you think?
Yeah,
I
I'm
agree.
in favor of that. I mean, I'm glad Brian said what he said, because I opposed it on town meeting floor. There's language in it that I'm not comfortable with it. I think you're gonna find department heads that are still uncomfortable with some of the language. And if it's gonna take more consideration and more input, I'm not suggesting we go to town meeting with it either. I think Brian hit it on the head. We have to be really sensitive to how we approach this.
So one question I have is, and I'll defer to those of you that were involved in this, is in order to provide the board some informational documents, was there a final report? Was there some final things which gives you the rationale, the reasons that I can then forward to everybody, so everybody's looking at the same?
There was a committee,
Okay.
There was a committee.
there was
yeah.
a bylaw,
Okay.
there was minutes, should be minutes, and a final report that was
I was gonna say,
given
but
to
yeah,
town
but
meeting, I
is there
think.
something that that I can distill down, and something that can be distributed for informational purposes to each of the members? Rather than just saying, well, here's all the minutes, here's,
No,
And
we
do the
need a
final
copy of the
report,
bylaw.
The bylaw, the final report, to me, those two
I
be
think you-
paramount.
It might have been a taped town meeting, so if we can recall the date, we can take advantage of watching the
Yeah.
commentary.
So,
I agree. The more information that, for me anyway, because I'm not as versed on this as, I didn't sit on the board then. So I don't have an opinion one way or the other at this until I actually look at the information and get the information. So for me, more information is always better. So, and again, things outside of maybe the minutes for me would be interesting. I don't know if anybody else wants those, but I can get those outside of,
So
I can get those myself.
if
so.
it helps, I know Mr. Lanning chaired that last committee, and I will be seeing him tomorrow. I can ask and see if, just make sure, confirm what, documents were produced, reports, et cetera, and we can dig those out. I know that everybody on that committee put a lot of effort into that, and came close,
Yep.
But,
Okay.
no
Can
cigar.
we solicit input from department heads prior to our
Sure.
next meeting? Because I think that's gonna be one of my questions.
So can that be done?
Can be.
All right. Any other comments? I think we do need a vote to close the warrant.
You do need a vote to close the warrant as presented with, or as amended.
So I would move that we close the warrant as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right, public comment? Mr. Lit, welcome, sir.
Tim Litt, 148 Woodland Road. I have two things related to the Municipal Technology Committee, as my usual hobby horse here. The first is a thank you for putting together the selection committee. That worked really well. I attended the public parts of their meetings. It seemed like you had a good collection of people. They organized, they went through things, and I think there was a lot of thought and deliberation. And I just, since I pushed so hard for you to get it done, I want to make sure that you have my thanks, and especially Mr. Schifrin for the time that he put in. The second
And
thing,
Mr. Ballantyne.
no, I think I got it right.
All right.
The second thing is I want to remind you that you also need to appoint your ex officio member to that board. The presumption has always been that it would be the IT manager, and that would be a good thing to vote while you're still here, so that we don't have anything else standing in the way of getting it going.
So that's not on our agenda, so I think we could, if,
But it
Mr.
is an ex
Purple,
officio appointment.
we could do that at our next meeting. We could understand what the options are and who would be viable candidates.
I would suggest, given that it's not specifically on your agenda, and we've had issues before if things are not specifically on there.
We don't vote on public, we don't even generally have conversation, meaning debate on public comment, so we'll take it under advisement and may be able to put something on a
We can
follow.
put that on the agenda.
Yeah. Thank you. Anything further?
Hello, Ben Kais, 43 Lovers Lane. It came to my attention that earlier in this meeting, there was a discussion about the parcel of land between the existing Park Central site and Lynbrook Road, heading up to Route 30. I was not at the meeting until just a few minutes ago, so I haven't had a chance to listen to the video, but I do understand there's a conversation going on about using that land to gain access to, for a new building proposal in the Park Central site. Is that correct?
No, there's a proposal that's on the table right now from Mr. DePietri to construct a commercial building, up on the Park Central property. The global discussion of finding a better way to access that property is not something that's on the table at this point. It's just something that I think needs to be discussed at some point.
Okay, so was it being discussed tonight or not?
There was a discussion, there was an option that was, in terms of finding another north-south connection from Route 9 to Route 30. And there was something that was mentioned about the potential of looking at a MassWorks grant to help create that from that parcel up through to Route 30, yes.
Okay, so this is a conversation that I'm aware has been going on, actually, and I've heard rumors of it quite a lot. Labrie Fellowship, I work for Labrie Fellowship, that's where I live. That land belongs to Labrie Fellowship. And so at no point has anybody come and asked Labrie Fellowship whether we would be interested in selling that land or anything. It's really disconcerting to know that the conversation is happening behind our back about what might be done with this land to gain access for the developer, private developer, basically seeking to take land from another private owner. And so the land is not for sale. I don't know, I don't understand how these conversations can go on for so long without ever coming to us and mentioning to us whether we approve of this, whether we're interested or not. I think the assumption that I've assumed that people know we're not interested, and so they don't want us to know what the conversation is.
So I'm not aware this conversation's been going on long. I'm not sure where that comes from, quite honestly. At least not at my level. It's been going on for a long period of time.
Yeah,
So I don't know. I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Various different conversations I've heard. One with Chief Morrow, where it was suggested as a potential alleviation of the emergency access, and it just seems to me, and to what's most distressing about this is it seems that boards and town officials are jumping through a lot of hoops to help this developer to basically, hopefully, take this land from another private landowner. And I don't know whether the developer himself is initiating this and trying to get you different board members to chase this down and to pursue it. But I just wanted to make absolutely clear that Labrie Fellowship is not interested in this at all, and certainly has no interest in selling the land. Would have absolutely no interest in having a road go through that land, which would be essentially in the middle of our pond. There's this pond between us and the 495 embankment. There's not even enough room for an access road to go through to Route 30.
Yeah, that's appreciated. So this is only something that came up here under the town administrator's report to us. It wasn't something that we're dealing with or discussing. It came up in another board, and he just wanted to make sure that there was awareness in the town, so.
May I ask what other board where it did come up, where the conversation came up? Or-
Planning board.
Planning board?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, yeah. And I understand that it's not sort of on the table in terms of a decision tonight, but I want to make sure as early as possible that each of you on the Board of Selectmen know this is not something Labrie is interested in, also something that we find quite distressing, that we've never been asked to be a part of this conversation. And that has kind of a sinister feel to me, because what are people talking about our land, without ever actually asking us? So I just want to make sure that's on the record. But thank you.
Thank you, sir.
If I may, sir, I would suggest that you have a conversation with the town planner as to when these discussions may come up, and speak directly with the planning board if it happens to be on their agenda.
Okay.
We just received it as an update, that's all.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. All right, anything further? Sir?
Hi, Steve Phillips, 26 Main Street. I know everybody's very busy. I'll be, and the Board of Selectmen has a lot of things on its plate. The one thing that I wanted to keep in everybody's attention at this point is that the Main Street project, as you can see, is finally starting construction. I don't know whether the formal state piece has started or whether it's the town.
I don't think that is. Can
No,
you give an
that's,
update
no,
on
it's,
what
it's
that work
the
actually is?
utility company is actually replacing their line. That is not part of the Main Street project. So
Okay.
that's something that they're doing that's separate and distinct.
Okay. Then the general question I have, I'm hoping that when it comes to the real construction phase, that it's going to operate under a different set of rules than this. If I could maybe give a couple of pictures. Those two pictures are what the street looked like in front of my house at 11 a.m. Yesterday morning. They showed up at 8:30 with no prior notice. My driveway was closed off for 4.5 hours. No vehicles could enter or leave, and the construction workers and police on the site, I know I wasn't there, but my wife felt that they were very unhelpful when she returned from her errands, and all of a sudden our driveway is blocked off, and they couldn't give us a time for when this was going to be completed. It was just, well, it's going to be done when it's done. And, there's a lot of minor inconveniences on this particular project that I could go into. I can deal with my mailbox getting knocked over or vehicles turning around in my driveway and that kind of stuff. But when it comes to, blocking access to a resident's house for almost 5 hours, I think that there has to be some procedure where residents are going to get notified when this kind of thing happens. You know, it was fortunate that it was only a minor inconvenience to us, but, you know, who knows what could have happened. And I was blocked into my driveway with no notice and no help from them whatsoever. I also learned today, I've had a note on my door that due to routine pruning, my two hydrangea trees that are over 100 years old are all of a sudden getting routinely pruned because they're under a power line where they've been for the better part of the last 100 years. So I mention these things only as I think that this project has the potential, certainly, it's going to be a big, dirty, messy project that's going to last for a long time. And my concern is that at least when the formal project starts, you know, we've heard that there were going to be restrictions on how long people could be blocked off from leaving their property, and that we'd have a contact person who was going to be, you know, available all the time you know, if we had questions or things like that. So what I'm really asking the Board of Selectmen is to please stay focused and attentive to this project. I don't know what the formal mechanisms are for residents to express complaints and concerns, and I think that if those aren't already there as part of the state project, I think that they need to be there. You know, we're willing to do a lot to let this project happen, but you know, you got to let me out of my driveway for Christ's sake. So that's pretty much all I had. I guess I wanted to ask the Board of Selectmen to consider doing it right now.
You look into that, Mr. Purple?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Karen Shimkus, Lynbrook Road. I'm sorry, I've been down for the count with the flu, as many people have for the last number of meetings, and I've been watching them at home, and I just wanted to express deep concern about what I see as a diminution in the democratic process. I noticed at the last BOS meeting there was no public comment section. I also noticed that the board has taken a vote which overrides a Concom vote. This is very, very disturbing to me. As I watched the Concom meeting on the topic of the St. Mark's conservation restriction, there were many very good comments from professionals in the audience who you know, related concerns about the conflict of interest of the town owning the CR versus Sudbury Valley trustees. You know, one comment in particular stood out with me, and that was a woman who got up and said, look, you know, we've heard that town council supports this dual approach, but it's not how it's done statewide. It is, you know, held with one holder for obvious reasons, conflict of interest reasons. So she said that he could give no sensible reason as to why you would have multiple holders. So I'd like to support her comment that I have not heard a sensible reason and a legal basis for having two holders. It seems to me that it is a conflict of interest. I've also heard that our town council has virtually no experience in CRs. It may have worked on one, but it is very alarming to me that 2 or 3 people in town would override a committee vote and other experts, legal experts who've been hired and paid for by us, the residents. So, you know, in terms of democratic process and checks and balances, why bother having committees when you can just, you know, unilaterally be in some kind of anarchy and just, you know, ignore the residents? Of course, the people who show up at these meetings and express their concerns are the people who are affected the most. I mean, I've heard the argument many times that, you know, well, we don't have enough people showing up, or we're only hearing from a select few. You know, that is outright spin. That's incorrect and wrong. You know, the people who are impacted the most should be listened to very carefully. I've also heard, you know, comments like, shut up, sit down, in so many words. or we don't want to hear that again. We want to hear, if it's not new, we don't want to hear from you. That is the worst diminution of the democratic process I can even think of. Because you've got more than one resident living on one street who may share the same concern. You know, the golden rule, folks. Treat people like how you would like to be treated. Treat people like you would like to be treated. What if these impacts were in your yard, impacting the value of your residents? Or 3,000 or 4,000 new trips coming down your road? Treat people like how you would like to be treated. Thank you.
All right, anything further? All right, our next meeting will be on the 27th of February. Anything? 26th? 27th is what I'm seeing. We'll make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.